Today, is there any chance that the WNBA, that Cathy Engelbert saw some of the ratings that I'm about to show you now and said, hey, Indiana Fever, can you do us a favor? Can you do us a solid? Can you just tease a Caitlin Clark return, kind of boost these up a little bit? Can you just dangle a Caitlin Clark return in front of the fans' faces, try to boost these ratings up a little bit? There was one matchup that this league can consistently rely on to produce massive viewership numbers.
The WNBA just received the most brutal reality check in sports history, and the numbers are so embarrassingly bad that Commissioner Cathy Engelbert is probably hiding under her desk, praying that nobody notices how spectacularly this league has collapsed without Caitlin Clark. We're not talking about a slight dip in viewership or a minor setback that can be explained away with convenient excuses. We're witnessing a complete free fall that has exposed just how utterly dependent this entire operation was on one player carrying the entire league on her back. The playoff ratings didn't just decline, they absolutely nosedived faster than a lead balloon, dropping a staggering 40% from last year and leaving arenas so empty that you could hear individual conversations echoing off the walls.
News was just announced that WNBA TV ratings are down more than 50% since Caitlin Clark's injury. And it was also reported that the Indiana Fever television viewership is also down over 53%. Now, I know a lot of us were expecting some sort of dip since Caitlin Clark has been out with injury, but I don't think all of us were expecting the entire viewership of the entire WNBA.
What was supposed to be the WNBA's breakthrough season has turned into a masterclass in how to completely waste the biggest opportunity in women's sports history through incompetence, mismanagement, and a stubborn refusal to protect the very player who was single-handedly saving their entire product. Smash that like button and drop league disaster in the comments, because what I'm about to expose will make you understand exactly why this league is teetering on the edge of complete collapse. The numbers tell a story that's so damning it should be required reading for anyone who wants to understand how not to run a professional sports league. When Caitlin Clark was healthy and playing, the Indiana Fever's games were pulling in over 1.2 million viewers on national television, creating the kind of appointment viewing that the WNBA had only dreamed about for decades. Fast forward to the playoffs without Clark, and we're looking at games struggling to crack 500,000 viewers, with some matchups performing so poorly that they're getting beaten by reruns of cooking shows and late-night infomercials.
That's not a trend that the WNBA is excited about. That's a trend that Cathy Engelbert would say, hey, Fever, hey, Lynn Dunn, hey, Kelly, hey, Amber, can you guys start dangling that Caitlin Clark return like you used to do? You know, before Caitlin Clark gave a statement and you guys were hands off? Can you guys, just string them along a little bit more? We want to get these ratings back up. We want to get these.
The contrast is so stark and undeniable that even the most loyal WNBA defenders can't spin these numbers into anything resembling success or progress. But the ratings collapse is just the tip of the iceberg, because the empty arenas tell an even more devastating story about how completely this league has fumbled their golden goose. Ticket prices have dropped by more than 50% across the board, yet teams are still struggling to fill even half their capacity because casual fans simply don't care about watching inferior basketball without the star power that initially drew them to the sport. You can literally bring your entire extended family, your dog, and your neighbor's hamster to most games and still find whole rows of empty seats with plenty of legroom, which is exactly the opposite of what this league was hoping to achieve during what they called their breakthrough season. The most infuriating aspect of this entire disaster is watching Commissioner Cathy Engelbert continue to act like everything is going according to plan while the league burns down around her.
The WNBA has a problem, and that problem is Caitlin Clark not playing in WNBA games. Now, what all does this affect? The ratings are plummeting. Guys, there's ratings for a couple of these games that are eye-popping.
She keeps giving interviews about growth and momentum while ratings crater, attendance plummets, and star players either get injured or quit mid-season because they can't deal with the chaos anymore. It's like watching the captain of the Titanic brag about how great the ship looks underwater. Technically, it's still floating, but definitely not in the way anyone actually wants or expects from professional leadership. What makes this situation even more maddening is knowing that this was completely preventable if the league had simply done its job and protected their most valuable asset instead of allowing her to get repeatedly targeted and injured by players who treated her like a human crash test dummy. Every single game Caitlin Clark played, you could count on seeing at least 3 or 4 plays where defenders would deliberately try to hurt her, knowing that the referees wouldn't call anything and the league office wouldn't impose any meaningful consequences for trying to end the career of their biggest star. The officials looked like they were pulled straight from a mall food court during lunch rush, with the consistency of a Magic 8 ball and the competence of people who thought they signed up to officiate roller derby instead of professional basketball.
Indiana, against the Chicago Sky, right after that game, they opened an investigation once again into the fans, where they found nothing, but the damage had already been done at that point. If some of these things happen just one time here and there, or there's one certain media personality who's just always saying these kind of things, then whatever. I feel like fans as a whole can be like, okay, whatever, this person is just a hater. But this is something that has happened over and over and over again, and over time, it starts chipping away at how much you're going to actually care and want to support an organization if they continue to do.
The injury epidemic that has decimated this season reads like an orthopedic surgeon's Christmas wish list, with every major star either sidelined with mysterious ailments or dealing with the accumulated damage from months of being allowed to get mauled without protection. Caitlin Clark has spent more time recovering than actually playing because defenders treat her like she owes them money, and every drive to the basket feels like a new episode of How Hard Can We Smash Caitlin Before the Refs Finally Notice. Sophie Cunningham, who was supposed to be a shining example of the league's bright future, is now done for the entire season after getting deliberately injured by yet another dirty play that went unpunished. Angel Reese literally quit mid-season, which should have been a 5-alarm fire for league leadership, but instead was treated like just another minor inconvenience. The officiating this season has been so consistently terrible that it deserves its own category of professional incompetence, with referees who look like they're still chewing pepperoni pizza while trying to decide whether a flagrant foul actually happened. The consistency exists somewhere between a fortune cookie and complete randomness.
Clark thing, man. I mean, it's embarrassing. It is embarrassing what you guys have done. And then people are catching on to your tactics. You got the people on Twitter catching on to your tactics. Like, look at this right here. Look at this right here. They say ESPN didn't want to show the ratings were down from WNBA All-Star Game because Caitlin Clark.
One game, a massive shove is perfectly legal. The next game, someone sneezes too hard and gets ejected for unsportsmanlike conduct. If these refs had their own statistical categories, it would be turnover 0, bad calls every single possession, and an overall rating that makes replacement level look like an improvement. But here's where the conspiracy theories start making perfect sense. The timing of various injury announcements and return teases seems suspiciously coordinated with whenever the league desperately needs a ratings boost. When numbers crater and social media starts buzzing about the WNBA's collapse, suddenly we get mysterious reports about Caitlin Clark maybe returning soon, or practice footage that suggests she's closer to playing than anyone thought. It's almost like Commissioner Engelbert called up the Fever front office and said, "Hey, can you do us a solid and dangle a Clark return in front of fans' faces to boost these embarrassing ratings numbers?" The social media reaction has been particularly brutal for the league because fans are using their platforms to document the decline in real time, posting side-by-side comparisons of packed arenas from early in the season versus the ghost towns we're seeing in the playoffs. Twitter is filled with memes of tumbleweeds rolling across empty seats, and the league's own promotional posts have become unintentional comedy shows where fans mock the exciting WNBA action while asking exciting where, at which game, in what dimension. The replies are a masterclass in fan frustration and disappointment with an organization that promised growth but delivered chaos.
Roads. Well, how about this? Pay us what you owe us. That looks like a ham sandwich and some Lay's tater chips right now. It's getting bad. I feel bad for Caitlin Clark. She come out and said on Sue Bird's podcast that she's feeling the pressure of not playing in these games. And that Fever Sky viewership fell off the map.
The economic implications of this collapse are staggering when you consider how much money the WNBA invested in marketing this as their breakthrough season, only to watch everything fall apart because they couldn't figure out how to protect their most valuable asset. Corporate sponsors are probably having serious conversations about whether their investments in women's basketball make sense when the product becomes unwatchable the moment the star attraction gets injured. Television partners who signed deals expecting Caitlin Clark-level ratings are now stuck broadcasting games to audiences smaller than most high school basketball tournaments. What's particularly insulting to longtime WNBA supporters is how this disaster has wasted the biggest opportunity in women's sports history through pure incompetence and stubbornness. For the first time ever, casual sports fans were actually interested in women's basketball, buying tickets, purchasing merchandise, and talking about WNBA games on social media. This was the window, the real chance to prove that women's professional basketball could be a sustainable and profitable enterprise. Instead of capitalizing on that momentum by protecting their star and building around the interest she generated, the league allowed her to get repeatedly targeted until she was too injured to play, taking all that newfound enthusiasm with her to the sidelines.
When I think about Caitlin Clark, the operative word that comes to my mind is gratitude. There's an incredible level of gratitude that should be accorded to this young lady with what she did for the sport.
How was the attendance for Team USA in the Olympics? What would it have been like if Caitlin Clark was playing on that team? Remember the first game? Look at this right here. National broadcast viewership. What are we talking about here? 1,000, what is that? 1.219? Is that the number? And the game afterwards got 485,000. So the Fever in their game against the Minnesota Lynx was 1.219 million.
The contrast with how other professional leagues handle their superstars makes the WNBA's failure even more inexcusable and embarrassing. The NBA literally bends over backwards to protect players like LeBron James and Stephen Curry because they understand that without stars, nobody watches, ratings die, and ticket sales plummet. It's basic business sense that apparently escaped the WNBA's leadership completely. The NFL treats quarterbacks like priceless works of art. You breathe too hard on Patrick Mahomes, and referees throw flags faster than you can say roughing the passer. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark gets body checked into the scorer's table and refs just wave play on like nothing happened. The player exodus that's currently happening should be setting off every alarm bell in the commissioner's office, but instead is being treated like business as usual in a league that has completely lost control of its product. When Angel Reese decides she'd rather spend time on Instagram than risk another game where she might get tackled like she's trying out for the NFL, that's not just one player making a personal decision, that's a damning indictment of the environment and culture that leadership has allowed to fester.
NBA's black superstars should thank their lucky stars for the record ratings Caitlin Clark is detonating, even if new fans are mostly white fans. It doesn't matter what color eyeballs are. But the other day, I must admit, it hit me like Katie Bell Henderson telling me that's enough. I told myself it's not racist for me to like Caitlin.
Players are dropping out faster than a poorly run reality show, and each departure takes more credibility and star power away from an already depleted product. The most tragic aspect of this entire collapse is knowing that the players themselves deserve so much better than the system that's failing them at every turn. These women are giving everything they have while refs whistle like they're at a toddler's birthday party, leadership treats their health like an optional side quest, and the commissioner markets them only when it's convenient before abandoning them the second things get difficult. They don't deserve to play in games that look more like rugby matches than basketball, and they definitely don't deserve to have their careers sabotaged by an organization that can't figure out the basics of player protection and professional management. The financial reality facing the WNBA after this disaster season is that they simply cannot afford another year like this one without facing serious questions about long-term viability. Ratings are in the toilet, attendance is embarrassing, merchandise sales have collapsed, and the momentum from Caitlin Clark's rookie season has been completely squandered through mismanagement and negligence.
You see, this is exactly what we were talking about. WNBA All-Star ratings are in for 2025, and it is down 40%. 40% from last year. That's bad. That is really bad. We already watched the ticket prices drop by more than 50% because Caitlin Clark was not playing. This is bad news for the WNBA.
When your All-Star game ratings drop 40% year over year and playoff games are struggling to find audiences, you're not just having a bad season, you're witnessing the potential death spiral of an entire professional sport. The empty promises and corporate speak coming from league leadership have become increasingly disconnected from the reality that anyone watching can see with their own eyes. Commissioner Engelbert keeps talking about growth and building momentum while presiding over the most spectacular collapse in recent sports history, using buzzwords about reviewing protocols and player development that translate to, "We'll do nothing but use big words so you think we did something." It's become a masterclass in how to destroy credibility through tone-deaf leadership and an inability to acknowledge obvious problems. Looking at the bigger picture, this season has essentially proven that the WNBA's entire business model was built around one player's ability to generate interest and excitement, and when that player got injured due to the league's failure to protect her, the whole house of cards came tumbling down.
You guys can sit there and say, oh, you guys are just trying to uplift one player. Oh, the league is more than one. I agree, the league is more than one player. It's more than one good basketball player. But is there more than one player that moves the tide?
The casual fans who Clark brought to women's basketball have largely disappeared, leaving behind the same small core audience that the league had been struggling to expand beyond for decades. All that progress, all that momentum, all that potential, gone because leadership couldn't figure out how to keep their biggest star healthy and on the court. The conspiracy theories about deliberate sabotage might sound extreme, but when you look at the pattern of decisions and non-decisions that led to this collapse, it's hard to believe this level of incompetence is purely accidental. From allowing dirty players to repeatedly target Clark without consequences, to the mysterious injury reports that conveniently surface whenever criticism mounts, to the complete failure to capitalize on unprecedented interest in the sport. Either this is the most spectacularly inept leadership in sports history, or there are other factors at play that fans aren't being told about. The long-term damage from this season extends far beyond just ratings and attendance numbers because trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild in professional sports. The casual fans who invested time, money, and emotional energy into following the WNBA this season have been rewarded with chaos, injuries, poor officiating, and broken promises about when their favorite player might return. Those people aren't going to just forget about being disappointed and misled when next season starts. They're going to remember exactly how this organization handled its moment in the spotlight. The most damning evidence of this league's failure is that they had everything handed to them on a silver platter: a transcendent star, unprecedented media attention, record-breaking viewership, and genuine mainstream interest in women's basketball, and they managed to completely destroy all of it through a combination of negligence, incompetence, and a stubborn refusal to adapt their approach to protect what was working. Future business school case studies will examine this season as a perfect example of how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory and waste the opportunity of a lifetime through organizational dysfunction and leadership failure. The ripple effects of this collapse are already being felt across the entire women's sports landscape because the WNBA's spectacular failure has provided ammunition for every critic who argued that women's professional sports couldn't sustain mainstream interest or generate profitable audiences. All those corporate executives who are finally starting to take women's athletics seriously are now looking at these catastrophic numbers and questioning whether their investments were based on a temporary fluke rather than genuine, sustainable growth. The damage extends far beyond just one league because this disaster has set back the cause of women's professional sports by potentially decades. What's particularly galling is watching ESPN and other major media outlets desperately trying to spin these numbers into something that doesn't look like complete failure. They're using every statistical manipulation and creative interpretation they can think of to avoid acknowledging that their massive investment in WNBA coverage has resulted in some of the worst ratings in recent television history. The same networks that were hyping up the league's growth earlier this season are now either completely ignoring the playoff ratings or burying them in footnotes while focusing on meaningless metrics like social media. Engagement and demographic diversity to distract from the fact that nobody is actually watching. The international embarrassment factor cannot be overstated because the rest of the world was finally starting to pay attention to American women's basketball thanks to Caitlin Clark's global appeal, and now they're witnessing this spectacular organizational meltdown in real time. Countries that were considering investing in women's professional leagues are probably having serious second thoughts after watching how the WNBA managed to completely waste the biggest opportunity in the sport's history. The damage to the league's international reputation and expansion plans is likely irreversible. The player development crisis that nobody wants to talk about is how this season has essentially wasted a year of growth and improvement for dozens of talented athletes who deserve better than to play in this chaotic environment. Young players who should have been learning from veterans and developing their skills have instead spent the season dealing with inconsistent officiating, injured teammates, and a general atmosphere of dysfunction that makes it impossible to focus on basketball fundamentals. The long-term impact on player development and league talent levels will be felt for years to come. The coaching carousel that's inevitably coming is going to be brutal because no competent coach wants to be associated with this level of organizational failure and mismanagement. Why would any respected coach want to sign up for a job where the league office won't protect their best players, the referees are incompetent, and the front office communication is so poor that fans are creating conspiracy theories about basic injury reports? The talent drain in coaching and front office personnel is going to make rebuilding even more difficult. The merchandise and licensing nightmare that's developing behind the scenes is something the league definitely doesn't want fans to know about. When your biggest star isn't playing and casual fans lose interest, those jersey sales and branded products start piling up in warehouses while retailers demand refunds and cancel future orders. The financial hit from unsold Caitlin Clark merchandise alone is probably staggering, and that's before you factor in the opportunity cost of all the licensing deals and partnerships that would have been signed if this season had gone according to plan. The developmental league implications are equally disastrous because the WNBA was supposed to be the aspirational destination for college players and international prospects looking to play professional basketball at the highest level. Now, talented players are probably looking at this season and wondering whether European leagues might offer better opportunities for career development and financial stability. When your Premier League becomes a cautionary tale rather than an inspiration, you've lost one of your most important recruiting advantages. The television contract negotiations that are coming up in the next few years are going to be absolutely brutal for the WNBA because networks are going to point to this season's ratings as evidence that women's basketball isn't a reliable television product. The leverage that the league might have had after Caitlin Clark's rookie season has completely evaporated, and they're going to be negotiating from a position of weakness that could result in significantly reduced media rights deals. The financial implications of lower television revenue will affect every aspect of league operations for years to come. The fan psychology aspect of this disaster is particularly fascinating because it reveals how quickly mainstream audiences will abandon a product when they feel like they've been misled or disappointed. The casual fans who bought tickets expecting to see Caitlin Clark play and instead got inferior basketball with empty seats around them aren't just disappointed customers, they're actively spreading negative word of mouth that discourages others from giving the league a chance. The viral nature of social media means that every empty arena photo and every frustrated fan rant reaches thousands of potential customers who might have otherwise been interested. The sponsorship and advertising exodus that's quietly happening behind the scenes is probably the most financially devastating aspect of this collapse because corporate partners don't just pull current funding, they also cancel future commitments and warn other companies about the risks of associating with an unreliable product. When major brands start treating WNBA sponsorships as cautionary tales rather than smart investments, the league faces an uphill battle to rebuild those relationships that could take decades to recover from. The competitive balance issues that have emerged from this injury-plagued season have created a playoff product that nobody wants to watch because the most talented teams have been decimated while mediocre squads advance by default. Fans aren't tuning in to watch inferior basketball between teams that wouldn't have made the playoffs in a normal season. And the lack of compelling storylines or star power makes the entire postseason feel like a participation trophy ceremony rather than a legitimate championship competition. The youth participation crisis that's developing at the grassroots level is something the league should be terrified about, because young girls who might have been inspired to play basketball after watching Caitlin Clark are instead seeing a sport where stars get injured constantly and games are decided by incompetent officials. When your professional league becomes a negative advertisement for the sport itself, you're not just losing current fans, you're damaging the pipeline of future players and supporters that the league depends on for long-term survival. The academic and research community that was starting to take women's sports seriously as a subject worthy of study and analysis is now probably questioning whether the WNBA is a legitimate professional operation or just an expensive social experiment that's failing in real time. Universities that were developing women's sports management programs and research initiatives based on the league's apparent growth are now dealing with a case study in organizational failure that undermines the credibility of the entire field. The international expansion plans that the WNBA have been promoting are essentially dead on arrival because no foreign market is going to invest in a league that can't even maintain basic competency in its home country. The dream of WNBA games in London, Mexico City, or other international markets becomes laughable when you can't fill arenas in American cities and your television ratings are consistently embarrassing. The technology and innovation partnerships that were being developed based on the league's apparent momentum have probably been quietly shelved because tech companies don't want to associate their cutting-edge products with a failing sports organization. The missed opportunities in sports analytics, streaming technology, and fan engagement tools represent another layer of damage that extends beyond traditional sports metrics. The cultural impact of this failure cannot be understated because the WNBA was positioned to be a symbol of progress and achievement in women's athletics, and instead it's become a cautionary tale about incompetent leadership and wasted opportunities. The broader women's rights and equality movements that had embraced the league's success are now dealing with a high-profile failure that gives ammunition to critics who argue that women's sports aren't viable or sustainable. The legal and regulatory scrutiny that's likely coming as a result of this disaster could create additional headaches for a league that's already struggling with basic operational competence. When you have conspiracy theories about gambling implications and deliberate season manipulation gaining traction among fans, don't be surprised if regulatory bodies start asking uncomfortable questions about league integrity and transparency. The next generation of sports media personalities and content creators who might have built careers covering women's basketball are now probably looking at other opportunities because there's no future in covering a league that nobody watches and that consistently disappoints its supporters. The talent drain in sports journalism and content creation will make it even harder for the league to rebuild its media presence and cultural relevance. The ultimate irony of this entire disaster is that the WNBA finally had the star power, media attention, and cultural momentum to achieve everything they had been working toward for decades, and they managed to destroy it all through a combination of arrogance, incompetence, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what made their product appealing in the first place. They had the golden goose and decided to neglect it until it died, leaving behind nothing but empty arenas, crater ratings, and a cautionary tale about how not to manage a professional sports league.